Welcome back to the Built Bodies podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to be bringing you through my top 5 lessons that I learned through going through a bodybuilding prep. Now, this prep totally changed my life, and I go over how I lost 60 pounds, struggled with a bunch of things after the show, and also go into what it's like to actually compete in a bodybuilding competition. So if you want to find out more about how I lost 60 pounds, the pros and cons that came with that, as well as the pros and cons that came with competing, listen up. I hope you enjoy the episode, and if you do receive any value from it, I would greatly appreciate you writing a review and rating it or commenting any questions depending on what platform you're listening to. Have a good one and enjoy. Have you ever wanted to compete in a bodybuilding show, or maybe you're curious about what it's like during the process after the show? In today's episode of the Built Bodies podcast, I'm going to go over the top 5 lessons that I learned after competing in my very first bodybuilding show. So 3 years ago in 2020, I decided that I wanted to do a bodybuilding show, and I decided that I was going to compete in classic physique, which is the division where they wear not the thongs, but like the banana hammocks. Okay. So I'm going to share a little bit about my story and why I decided to do a bodybuilding show, some of the lessons that I learned along the way. And I think that you'll find this insightful if you've ever wanted to really diet down and get to a very low body fat percentage and really have your muscles pop. Okay. I'll share some key insights on things that I personally struggled with and what to look out for so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. So let's get right into where I was kind of starting from. I was coming down from 230 pounds, and then my stage weight was 170. So it was a 60-pound prep, and this was 8 months long. And the reason why I tell you that is because that is a long fucking time to be disciplined, not have, anything else interfere with your life. Like, everything's kind of like controlled. The variables are all controlled. And I was basically living in a box at this time. And I did some traveling here and there because it was COVID, and I decided to go back up to Philadelphia, where I'm originally from Texas. I decided that I was going to kick out the COVID lockdown with my parents, my family, all that stuff, the people that matter to me most. And that's where I basically started my prep. Now, let's get into lesson number 1. So lesson number 1 in terms of things that I learned during my bodybuilding prep is that, bodybuilding will not make you love your body more. And I think this is something that most people find out the hard way before it's too late. So I'm telling you right now so you don't have to make that mistake. And what sucks is that, you become so fixated on how you look during that show. And, like you just look at yourself in a certain way when you see yourself on show day, and you're just like shredded to the bone, your veins are popping, and you haven't even really done anything, and you just you look insane, like you have never seen yourself look before. And when you lose that, it is such a big like kick in the balls. And if you're not content with how you look, your body gets better, and then after there's better in your terms and better up to a certain point, and then you slowly have to gain body fat back in order to bring yourself back up to a healthy standpoint. So if you're going into this the bodybuilding show space and you want to really compete in that, and you already have maybe an issue with just liking how your body looks already, I would say that it's really not going to give you a better perspective on how you look. Okay. And then lesson number 2 is going to go into comparing yourself to other people. Okay. I found it extremely difficult to kind of stay out of my own head by following too many people online. And I think that it's very important to talk about this too, because we live in a day and age where it's so easy to have so many influences. And the problem with that is that you're comparing your chapter 1 to their chapter 10. And that makes it very difficult to stay focused, stay in your lane. And when you're going through this process, you want the least amount of stress possible. And this comparison adds a whole nother layer of stress to the equation. So that's why I really tell people to look out for that and just understand that you have the right to follow who you want to follow. And you could also mute people online. And I've done both, and not to the offense of like, oh, I don't want to follow you because, I don't want to follow people. Like, I want to follow everyone. But it's so hard for me to stay on my own shit and focus on myself when I'm like so worried about what everyone else is doing. So normally what I do is end up muting some people, and it's not because I do not like them or I don't love them or whatever. I love their content and that's why I follow them. However, it's so hard for me to focus if I'm sitting there mindlessly scrolling. And I think that that's something that's super, super important to note. The third lesson that I learned is that if you ask a lot of your body, you're going to get a lot more out of it. And this is a very important lesson because rarely after like high school and any type of like sports that you may or may not have done, you get challenged. Okay. It's like very rare to like experience a challenge unless you're intentionally seeking it. And this was one of the first times that I have been challenged since competitive sports in high school. And what I asked of my body delivered. And I was shocked, okay? At one point, I was doing 45 minutes of running every single day on low calories, and I was a machine. I felt literally unstoppable, and I was shocking myself every single day in terms of what my body could stand. But it was only standing that because I was asking of it. And I feel like I've heard Cam Haynes say that before, is that you have to ask a lot for your body if you demand something from it. And I think that's a very important. I totally butchered that fucking quote, by the way. I don't know what Cam Haynes said, but it was something along the lines of that. And I remember hearing it, I think on maybe Nick Bear's podcast, and it was just something that really spoke to me because that's totally 100% true. Most people don't ask a lot of their body, so they don't really see what it's capable of doing. And when you go through a bodybuilding show, that is like you have a finish line, you have a goal, and you don't want to look like a fucking idiot when you get on that stage. So it's like balls to the walls. Every single thing is trying to be controlled for, and that's ultimately how you end up doing the best. And I actually was, lucky enough to win my show, and I can confidently say that there was not one fucking thing that I could have done more to win that show. I did everything right. I did everything exactly as my coach laid it out. I completed all my cardio. I never ate out when I wasn't supposed to. I followed the plan to a T, and that's why I won. That on top of having a really pretty good background already, that was one of the things that I thought would be, something to note. But the fourth lesson is that you need to not do this alone. And when I went through my bodybuilding prep, I had a very good coach. And the reason why a coach is crucial is because they're able to see things that you're not able to see, because you're not in your right mind. When you go through a bodybuilding show, you are literally depriving yourself of nutrients every single day, and then you're overexerting yourself in the form of cardio, weightlifting. You're undernourished. So you're not going to be able to make the best decisions possible for you, most likely, because you're not able to think straight about it and be objective, okay? You're normally going to be thinking with your emotions when it comes to adjusting calories, adjusting cardio, and seeing what weak points you need to kind of fill and work on during that process. And I was lucky enough to have a coach that was very objective and straight up with me throughout the entirety of the process. And what he noticed are things that I just would have slipped up on or missed myself if I was just doing this all on my own. So that's lesson number 4. And lesson number 5 is that the hard part really does not stop, or the hard part doesn't really start until after the show. The reverse dieting experience, the experience after the show where you no longer have this finish line and kind of the pressures let off a little bit, is one of the hardest parts of the process. And going into this, I already did not have a good relationship with how I viewed my body because I grew up a little bit on the chunkier side. I've always been a little bit more self-conscious, and that's kind of why I work so hard to keep my body in good shape, because I care about how I fucking look. So does everyone. And I don't care if you say that you don't. I think that you probably do. And when it comes to that post-show weight gain, one, it's necessary to increase your body fat after a show slowly over a period of time, so that some of the hormones that took a dip during that dieting phase, since it's so aggressive, you deal with things like lower test levels, your leptin and ghrelin are all out of whack, so your hunger and how food fills you up and makes you feel full, that's also just totally gone to shit. So all of these normal things that you didn't even think about before all of a sudden become a problem because you're hungry, your body's demanding a lot of food, but you can't give it all the food in the world. And the reason why is because you're just going to store a lot of that as extra fat. And that's why the post show is really, really difficult. There's no goal around, there's no finish line. And now it's kind of just like, okay, I'm off plan. So a couple things that I recommend to people when it comes to handling a post show, and I 100% want to have one of my buddies on who handled his post show very beautifully this time around as compared to his very first show. And I wanted to talk about that too. But some of the tips that I recommend is to have a good group of friends. If you're lucky enough to have a good group of friends, please reach out to them. More often than not, you've probably neglected them over the course of the last several months, just because you were in a bodybuilding show, you couldn't really do much. You were kind of living in this box, and sometimes you kind of push people away just to kind of like find sanity and control over everything that you can possibly control at that time. And it's a very like selfish sport. So this is pretty normal to happen, pushing friends away. Bring them back in if they'll accept you and plan events, okay? Keep yourself busy. I think that one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people kind of rebound is because they're not kept busy and they're usually alone. And that makes it very easy for you to just keep to yourself and eat at night or binge or hide food from your roommate, whatever. I've done all of that. So I want you to really learn from my mistakes, because that process is a super depressing process and it's not fun at all. So keep friends around, keep yourself busy. And I recommend that if you have any foods that you can't control yourself around, never keep them in the house, okay? If you keep them in the house or the pantry, it's going to be very hard to say no to those temptations when your willpower is like -0 or negative like 100. That -0, that doesn't even fucking make sense. It's a lot harder than it looks to talk on a podcast, guys, because like you're like really like thinking about what you're saying, and sometimes like you just start talking and like the words are not coming out like as good as they should be coming out, and it's a little bit different. Anyways, but just keeping temptations away in your pantry. If you have them at home and you're really struggling with discipline and your willpower will probably end up giving out. Okay, so don't even make it part of the equation by just removing those things and kind of getting them away from your, eyesight and temptation, and that's one of the biggest things that I would recommend. Now, that's going to wrap up this episode. These are 5 things that I've learned throughout my bodybuilding journey. And although it was pretty short-lived, I competed in 2020. I don't ever want to say that I will never do another show in the future, because I really don't know if I would or would not. But I felt like these insights could be helpful to anyone looking to really diet down and get to low levels of body fat, or someone who really wants to do a bodybuilding show in the future. So have a good rest of your day. Thanks so much for fucking watching. Really fucking appreciate you guys watching the show. And it would really mean a lot to me if you gave this podcast a share on your social media. Any help, is so much appreciated. And if you want to toss me a review, that would be awesome. Okay. I'm always looking to improve my podcast skills, and I'm just getting into the swing of things. So if I slip up on my words or use words that don't make fucking sense, it's fucking hard to like do this and make sense of everything and get all of your thoughts down exactly how you want to get them out. So thank you guys so much for bearing with me. All right. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.